give a warm welcome to the hosts of The Bride of Alternate Ending.
Hello, ghouls and goblins, and welcome back to Bride of Alternate Ending. I am always, your ghost, Brennan Klein, and with me, as always, is your co-ghost, Tim Brayton. Hello, Tim. How are you doing?
Hello, Brennan. How are you doing? Did you just have a microstroke in the middle of that?
I do every time I start this podcast. I cannot say as always. It always goes am always, and then I fall down the hill.
We can try rewriting the text.
Well, the thing is, it's not written down. It just exists in the cloud in my
what
head.
What about I am, as you know, your ghost?
Ooh. Okay. We'll see if I can...
if you can remember that in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, that's like that truck lane for when a truck is careening down the highway. There's like that lane that can pull off and hit all those sandbags. That's what that phrase is, and we'll see if I can aim right for that.
Love it. I can add to vehicular safety.
Yeah, no, that's really important. But anyway, so as I teased 2 weeks ago, we were supposed to talk about the 1983 movie Something Wicked This Way Comes to open our Disney/children's horror month.
Yeah, I feel, in fact, it not only won the poll, it won the poll to a degree that very few movies have won.
Yeah, it was an incredible landslide, which I think speaks to the Gen X nature of our audience, perhaps.
I was hoping for some more 80s kids who had Mr. Boogedy nostalgia, like myself.
Yeah, I'd seen neither, but I was hoping for Mr. Boogedy as well. That did not pan out. But yes, as I did find out, Something Wicked This Way Comes is not streaming, and the version on YouTube is like, you get a frame or so every 4 seconds, and have fun with that. So I was like, I gotta acquire this movie.
And it's bizarre to me that this particular film is not on Disney Plus for the reason that the film has been released as a Disney Movie Club exclusive Blu-ray, which is how I watched it. And I just find it inexplicable that Disney has possession of an HD master that they put on the Blu-ray, that they have not decided, well, we've got it, so let's just toss it right there on Disney Plus. I think that company might be stupid.
Yeah, it might be.
Believe it or not.
Or it could be among the things that they removed quietly from the platform, hoping nobody would notice.
No, I was reading things like as long ago as 2 years ago from people being like, why the hell can't I watch something like that on Disney Plus? This is it makes no sense. So it's a choice for some reason.
Okay, interesting. Well, but here's the thing. So I needed to find a way to watch Something Wicked This Way Comes, and I hope this doesn't become a sticking point in people justifying this is the reason that I did not like the movie. But I watched it as it was meant to be seen by renting it on VHS.
Except that is how it was meant to be seen.
Yeah, exactly. So I think...
Did you also rent a VHS player to go along with it?
I have a VCR.
Why?
Because I am into slasher movies from the 1980s, and I'm trying to watch them all. That's
an extremely good point.
Yeah, some of them you can only get that way. That's also how.
I think you need to learn how to sail the high seas, my friend.
To be fair, I'm not much of a sailor myself. But I neither have the talent. I don't have the talent for it. But also some of these titles just aren't anywhere. Like there's like Canadian TV slasher movies from '82. Sometimes you just gotta scrounge up a VHS.
Okay.
Because I have looked sometimes for the harder. I'll take my answer off the air. But anyway, I do. There may or may not be a ship that I've sailed upon in the Middle East from time to time.
Okay.
A schooner of some kind. Anyway, so Something Wicked This Way.
So you watched this film on VHS?
I did watch it on VHS.
Getting the full 80s kid experience.
Yes, which I think is... So I was going to say, I wanted to bring that up because it is kind of neat. Like, thank you to Burbank for being a weird place where the past is alive sometimes. But I didn't want anyone to blame the VHS format for the things that I thought about this movie, because let me tell you, all y'all watch this movie on VHS. This is not impeding my process of experiencing something wicked this way comes.
For the record, I don't believe I saw this film until I was deep into my 20s on DVD.
Interesting.
This was not actually a childhood movie for me.
Okay, so yeah, so it doesn't have that nostalgia for you either, it seems. So I
No, although Mr. Boogedy did, listeners who didn't vote for it.
Yeah, I mean, we've been having
now.
a much different conversation. But anyway, yeah, so we're not talking about Mr. Boogedy. We are talking about Something Wicked This Way Comes. Came out in '83. It's adapted by Ray Bradbury from Ray Bradbury from his novel, which I have not actually read. I read the first chapter as a kid and bailed.
I have read the novel.
Is it what is it? How's that going for you?
Well, I mean, it is the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there was an uncredited rewrite of the film, and that gets into his whole production story about the people who are miserable. The very messy production of this film. I'm sure we'll get into that. But so there are some tweaks and changes, but by and large, the movie is the novel. Like,
Okay.
there are small adjustments made to make it shorter because it's a 95-minute film and it's obviously a longer novel than that. Mm-hmm. But the bones are the bones, I would say.
Okay, that is good to know. I'm a little bit under read on Bradbury. I've read Fahrenheit 451. I've read that I think it's called Margot, that short story where the girl gets like locked in a closet on Venus and doesn't get to see the sun or whatever happens in that one.
Okay.
But that's kind of it. So yeah, I apologize.
I don't know if this is a take that's going to make people mad. I genuinely don't. I don't like Ray Bradbury. I think his prose is like a crazy old English lady's rose garden that hasn't been trimmed in decades. It's so flowery and so impenetrable and so twee. And I know that's one of the things that people who like him specifically like, the sort of lyrical quality of his text. I just don't vibe with it at all. So I come to this film not as a Bradbury fan, and in fact as someone for whom, again, Bradbury more or less adapted his own book. I mean, there's an uncredited tier of writing in between him and the movie, but there's a ton of dialogue or voiceover narration throughout this film that is Bradbury. It is definitely his text, and it is something that I find distasteful.
Fair enough. No, I definitely got the sense that the voiceover narration was ported over from the book wholesale, for sure.
And also for sure some of Jason Robards' lines, like some of the specific things he says.
Got it. Yeah, no, there are definitely some lines, like if we're talking about Jason Robards. We'll get to the plot. We're spoiling this movie. Let's just say that it's Something Wicked This Way Comes. I mean, I feel like people know.
If you don't know this, you at least know the combination of Stephen King's It and Needful Things, which are basically if you split this movie in half and send the two halves in opposite directions.
Yes. No, it felt so Stephen King to me.
Oh, it is clear to me in a way that I don't think it really was when I read the book, which was a very long time ago. I read the book when I was like 15. Stephen King stole this movie. Like, he stole so much from this book and possibly from this movie for much of his text, I suspect.
Oh, it certainly seems that way. But yes, shit, I forgot where we were headed.
Jason Robards, the sexiest man alive.
Oh yeah, exactly. He does have that line. There's a line about him being afraid of death. There's a lot of lines about him being afraid of death. But there's a way that he says, like, oh, if I had one wish, it would be to live longer or live forever or whatever. It would make me happy if you told me I had more life to live. And it was written in a way that's very circuitous and flowery. So I do feel
it's not written to be spoken.
No, it does, and
that's the big problem.
It does not sound correct.
Certainly, there's the opening monologue, which I don't have in front of me, but I wonder how quickly I can get it lined up, where one of the two child stars of the film is reminiscing from adulthood. And he goes on this, like, sort of big, glumpy meandering opening monologue. There it is. First of all, it was October, a rare month for boys, full of cold nights, long nights, dark promises. Days get short, the shadows lengthen. The wind warms in such a way you want to run forever through the fields, because up ahead 10,000 pumpkins lie waiting to be cut. That's not dialogue.
No.
You read that.
Yes.
It creates an image in your brain while you're reading. You can't say that. And just hearing the narrator try to, like, maneuver it. And I cut it off like a third of the way through. There's so much more monologue than that. That is not speech.
No.
And what it reminds me of, weirdly, the 1949 adaptation of The Fountainhead,
Okay.
which Ayn Rand had final script approval. Like basically, she got to write the shooting script, and other than it has to be X length, she got to give it to the filmmaking team, and they couldn't change anything of it. So she includes, The Fountainhead ends with this just monument length, like, narration in a courtroom. The last, 25 minutes of the film are that.
Jesus.
And I got the same sort of feeling of, this is what happens when an author... This is why we have screenwriters. So
Yes.
screenwriters can look at books and say, well, this was your thing and it was good in this medium, but I'm going to fix it now for our medium. And you just have an author being like, no, it's my words. They're my precious baby words, and refuses to let any of them be streamlined at all. And that's how you get this kind of writing.
Yeah, no, it just doesn't really work. And there's something really interesting to me at the core of the thing that Something Wicked This Way Comes is doing. That I guess, let's talk about the plot first, and then I'll get into that, because I'm curious about your take on it. But extremely briefly, Something Wicked This Way Comes. It follows two 12-year-old boys. There is Jim Nightshade, right? Sorry, I'm pulling it.
Jim Nightshade, which is a splendid Pulp Fiction name, I would say.
Oh, absolutely. Played by Sean Carson, and Will Halloway, played by Vidal Peterson, which is a name and a half.
Yes, indeed.
But anyway, so we've got these two young boys. They just kind of wander around town being disgusting shit boys and introducing you to the various folks of the town. There's an ex-football star who has lost his one arm and one leg. There's a barber who doesn't really have a character. He's just there. And there's their kind of a spinster teacher who used to be the most beautiful girl in town, and all of this stuff. And they're in this Main Street, small town, rural American kind of situation.
Which is something I will have words to say about, but we shouldn't. We're just getting into the plot, so let's not snap that thread quite yet.
Yeah, no, I think we're both aiming towards that. But anyway, a carnival rolls into town, and the kids get excited about it, but then there's these really creepy things that they witness and that they're suspecting about the carnival. And essentially, we learn pretty quickly. So it's run by Mr. Dark, played by Jonathan Pryce, who is not in it enough until the end.
Amen.
But yeah, so basically, the town is trying to... I mean, the carnival, I guess, is trying to steal the souls of the townspeople by giving them what they want, but at a price. And it's very much about weaponizing nostalgia, I feel. So it's like this older woman is nostalgic for a past where she's beautiful, and so she gets that. But she loses her eyesight, so she can't gaze upon herself anymore. And then it's all about, turning the adults back into kids, or back when they viewed themselves as whole or as beautiful or as young or whatever. And yet, okay, so now I'm getting to my point. So obviously the kids are figuring this out and trying to stop it. And also Will's dad is has a weak heart, and he's a librarian, and he's afraid of the world. And he is, just so terrified of dying that he refuses to live, basically. But it's interesting to me that the idea that nostalgia is kind of the villain, but it's also the entire thing that the movie is. The movie is obsessed with nostalgia, and it kind of loves it, but it's also trying to say that it's bad. And I'm not sure those two things kind of fit together for me.
Yeah, I think the movie just doesn't realize it's doing that. This is one of 3 Bradbury novels that were set in the town of Greentown, Illinois.
Okay.
Which doesn't exist. But it was, he sort of was creating a fanciful version of his own childhood in the town of Waukegan, Illinois, which is where I will start grousing.
Okay.
But not quite yet. I don't want to lose this thread. So it is very much a work of nostalgia for him. He's sort of diving back into his own childhood, his town, sort of reflecting on who he was as a 12-year-old boy, what he found interesting, what he found spooky, what he found fun. So there is at once this mixture of unchecked nostalgia and like, as you say, sort of, if you want to live in the past, that is bad. And I think the film simply doesn't recognize that it's doing that. I don't think it's turning it into an interesting irony. I don't think it's like trying to subvert its own message. I think it just doesn't realize it's doing that because it needed a screenwriter who was not married to the material, and it didn't have one.
Do you think the book realizes it's doing that or not?
Certainly not.
Okay, yeah. That seems consistent. And yeah, and just I want to get to your thing, but just real quick, for me, I mean, so much of this movie is, especially the first half of the movie, is just about nostalgia for this kind of timeless but 1950s-y kind of rural Americana. And we are now, I'm sorry, it's pushing a lot of nostalgia buttons, but not for me. I think it's possible for there to be nostalgia. It's definitely possible for there to be nostalgia for a time that you have not lived through. I think
the Germans have a word for it.
Oh, I think they.
That's not a German. That's not a joke. I think the Germans have a word for it.
No, you're right. I don't remember what it is. And I think that is something that is probably why this appealed to kids of the 80s still. And things from the 80s do appeal to me as nostalgia. Like, I own a VCR, like, I'm doing this slasher thing. Like, I get that. But we are now, like, 2 layers removed from my own experience. I also grew up in suburban California. The idea of a small-town Main Street, first of all, seems incredibly boring to me.
You have a small-town Main Street right there in Anaheim that I have personally been to on 3 separate occasions.
It's true. I actually grew up in Anaheim, so I guess I can't say that. But
we are talking about Disneyland,
yes.
For those of you who don't recognize the reference I just made.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and speaking of the town square in this movie is so modeled on the Disneyland Main Street.
Oh, this movie. If you told me it was shot in Disneyland, I'd be like, well, that doesn't seem 100% right, but I guess I buy it. Like, it is real stagey and real that specific version of a small town Main Street.
Yeah, and like to the exact architecture of how everything connects to each other. So I was looking for details. I was like, they weren't filming in Disneyland because they don't do that.
Right.
But I was checking all of the details and it's so exact. But anyway, so I don't have nostalgia for that. I don't give a shit about carnivals. There's just none of this is my personal experience. And also this is something I wrote about in my Letterboxd review, but I was thinking about it. And I also don't have nostalgia for or a wish for autumn. Really, because I grew up in California. We have the endless summer, and then in winter it is 60 degrees and it rains. And so to me, the idea of like a white Christmas and the snow and all that stuff, that has a kind of magic, mythical quality to me of like something that I never had and I've seen represented and feels like something I'm missing or feels like something special. But to me, the idea of autumn just kind of slipped between the cracks of that. And it's not something that feels magical to me or like something that just me specifically. It's not something that I personally connect with. So all of the things that this is doing, I understand exactly all the ways that it's pushing those buttons, but it's just like not working for me. And then that makes it really difficult to care about anything in the first half while these boys are just running around being annoying.
I want to sort of add to one thing you just said because it struck me as to the point of your own lack of nostalgia. When I was after I'd watched this film and I was kind of poking around to like learn more about the cast and crew, Sean Carson, who plays one of the 2 boys, the not the narrator. The narrator is the other character, but he's sort of the one who emerges as like the more dynamic of the two, I'd say. He also had appeared one of his handful of other films in The Funhouse.
Oh, was he? He was the disgusting shit boy in that movie too, right?
I believe that's correct. Yes, which is the other of the two Tobe Hooper films that I more or less fully like. And I reminded myself that you do not care for The Funhouse. I saw that you gave it 2 stars on Letterboxd and declared it one of the few slasher films you find boring. So you are consistent in your disinterest in carnivals, and I at least admire that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's again, this is just, it's from my childhood experience. These don't connect to my sense of childhood nostalgia or what childhood means to me. And I think that's incredibly important to what this movie is.
I think there's I want to trouble that a little bit for a couple reasons. One, I wouldn't say that what I have is nostalgia for carnivals, because I never really liked them.
Okay.
I think what it does tap into, which is not to say that you're wrong, I think you're right in a sort of more nuanced way. I think it's about how carnivals feel wrong, like they feel uncanny and sort of ersatz while you're in them.
Uh-huh.
And that is something that I remember from being a young person. It's like going to these places and it's like, it's not a real place. It wasn't here yesterday and it won't be here tomorrow. And there's just something untrustworthy about that. And you can sort of tell how everything has been held together with like bolts and nuts that are God knows how ancient. And are they actually going to hold, or are these things all just going to collapse while you're walking around them? And I think that this movie, not unlike The Funhouse, is good at just sort of absorbing that feeling of, no, these are creepy spaces. Like, even when they're fun and playful, they're still creepy to be in. And there's always something about them that feels like, yeah, you would believe that Satan travels the Midwest using this as his, like, pretext for going from town to town. So that is nostalgia the word for that? I'm not quite sure, but it certainly does tap into a sort of childhood anxiety.
Yes.
Or maybe that's the way to phrase it. Because I do have that feeling. Like, I see a carnival at night and I'm like, I don't know about this. And that does come from my childhood, for sure.
Oh, okay, that's a really good point. Yeah, so it's the kind of opposite. It's the thing that Poltergeist is doing, I think, to a much better effect, of like your fear of dolls or of clowns or of this creepy tree outside your window. Right. So whatever the reverse word is for that.
Yeah,
and
I'm sure the Germans have a word for that.
I'm sure they do. But yeah, and to me, I don't know, this is a very heterosexual Midwestern fantasy of childhood that I just is not for me.
That's fair. The other thing I wanted to push back a little bit, I feel like this movie does a shitty job of evoking autumn. And here's where I'm going to get into someone who grew up and was indeed at one point a 12-year-old boy in Illinois, which is where this movie claims to be set. Waukegan, Illinois is in the county I'm from.
Oh, okay.
I have been to Waukegan, which is now the county seat, very big city, largest city in Lake County, Illinois. I've been to Waukegan within the last 2 years. It's a place I know. Now, obviously, when Bradbury was a child, that was a long time before I was on the scene. I'm sure Waukegan was smaller. But there are buildings in Waukegan, Illinois, that I've seen with my own eyes that were there when Ray Bradbury was in his teens.
Got it.
Like, that's a reality. This movie is set in New England. It can tell me all it wants that it's set in Illinois, and I think Illinois comes up once or twice in dialogue. It's not like it doesn't insist on it, but this is not a movie set in the Midwest. Just full stop. It is set in rolling. It was shot in Vermont, so it literally, like, the rolling hills we're seeing, the sort of oak forests that kind of disappear into vales and dells. Those are the forests of Vermont. Illinois is flat, is the thing. The Midwest is flat. It's plains. It's wheat. It is not rolling hills and forests. And it doesn't matter. Like, that's not something the film is insisting on. It's just trying to get at this sort of, like, any place that carnivals can happen. But I think carnivals are sort of a Midwestern thing, especially. And Bradbury as an author was certainly very invested in the Midwest, and this is just not that film. And also, wherever it's set, it doesn't look like autumn to me. It looks like they propped up a whole bunch of fake trees with red leaves on them in the middle of the summer. And so the sense of autumn chill that's right there, front and center in the opening monologue, this film is not evoking it for me. Because carnivals don't come in the fall. Like, that's just a strange thing. And maybe that's part of what's meant to make the carnival feel uncanny and off. They're a summer phenomenon. But also, this just doesn't... It's not fall. It just isn't. And I find that to be something that the film wants to be fueling, especially its opening act, when it's really just about kind of placing us in that sort of rosy childhood nostalgia, main streets, playing with your buddies. Like, that is what it's doing for the first at least 15, maybe even 30 minutes. And it can't get there because, to me at least, it feels like such a false vision of the season. Like, this, to sort of tie back into your point, it feels like people who were born and raised in California were like, well, in the fall, there's red leaves, right? So there's the red leaves. It's the fall. Ta-da. And I don't buy it at all.
Okay, that's really interesting because like I said, I mean, I grew up with the Halloween 1978 Pasadena autumns. That's kind of
100%.
So that doesn't register to me at all. I obviously knew it was fall. They were really hammering that. They got the pumpkins at the opening monologue. So I just accepted as read that it was autumn and that's what we were getting. But
and it works on certain, like read the reviews of this. People talk about it as like an autumn viewing. I need to watch this every fall. It's like, okay, go with God, but not me.
Well, that's so interesting because I think that the movie it should be more autumny then. It should be pulling that off more.
I think it ought to, certainly, yes.
Yeah, because I think autumn is maybe the whole point. Because especially for the townsfolk, who's they're in the autumn of their lives. They're not actively dying, but their youthful spring is behind them. As they are being claimed by the carnival, the town itself is dying. Businesses are closing. I think autumn is so integral to the thing that this movie is doing that they should have pulled it off better for people who actually know what autumn is.
It would have helped, and this is the point where we should actually sort of talk about like the movie. So my response to this movie is that I find most of the opening half hour terribly dull and terribly unpersuasive.
Oh well, it is.
I like a couple things. I just straight up disagree with you on one thing. I like the kids. I think the actors are both very solid. I don't think either one of them is a Child Actor Hall of Fame level performance. But I buy them. I buy their friendship. I enjoy watching them, bumble around town. Yeah. I do actually, even though it looks like a set, I do like the set for the town. Like, it feels homey and cute. And I'm a sucker for that kind of thing. I like movies that feel like they take place in a sort of very tangible, well-defined physical space, even if it's not like a realistic physical space, which this one's not.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And I do kind of like a stage-bound kind of movie. Like, I like the fully indoors Skid Row of Little Shop of Horrors. I like that kind of putting on a show kind of energy.
Yeah.
I will push back a little bit, especially Vidal Peterson. I would say he's pretty good at being melancholy, but he is not good at being scared. And the third act asks him to be scared of some things, and he just kind of stares vacantly at them, and that is not...
There's one particular shot of both boys screaming that I feel had to have come really, really early in the shoot or really, really late in the shoot, because it is just insanely bad. And they are both like the least convincing screamers I've seen in a very long time.
Yeah, no. So it's maybe it's for the best as far as the central performances that this is not always a horror movie.
It is certainly not always a horror movie. So I timed it. Jonathan Pryce shows up at the 32-minute mark.
Jesus Christ!
And this is a 95-minute long film, and I think it just instantaneously gets better. Not like great yet, never, but when he first appears, like you can almost feel the movie like unclench its butt a little bit and suddenly become like, okay, there's actually going to be some horror in this horror movie, as I was promised. Because that's the thing. The opening act, other than like this very, I think, successful opening credit sequence where we see a train going through the very dark night, but we don't really see the shape of the train. We just kind of see like the lights defining it. And there's this like really creepy James Horner music cue playing underneath. Wildly inconsistent score. Like the score ranges from, oh my god, that's such a good horror cue, why didn't James Horner make more horror movies, all the way to like, I hate every bit of this sugar drenched John Williams bullshit. But the opening credits are great. And then that's it, basically, until Jonathan Pryce shows up, which again is 32 minutes into the film. And even then, it doesn't really start committing itself to the business of being a horror movie for children. I would say until the 52-minute mark. I timed that out as well. When Jonathan Pryce sort of reveals that whatever he is, he's not a normal human. And we begin to see him like manipulate and twist and do horrible things. So that's 52 minutes out of a 95-minute film where it's not really doing any of the things that I would identify as its core strengths. Because I do think when it commits to being a children's horror movie, it's good at it.
Yeah, I actually do have to agree with that, with the exception of maybe the very, very end of that, which I think is maybe the most chopped to pieces special effects shots shoved in bit of it.
Here's the reason I disagree with you on that. Creepy skeleton prop.
Oh, no, I love creepy skeleton prop.
And it's too bad that we get to creepy skeleton prop via the path of some awfully 1983 visual effects. But we get to creepy skeleton prop, and when I was 12, that is the only thing I needed to give a movie 5 stars.
Yes, no, I totally get that. And see, and I was, that's why I was trying to be very careful with my words, because the part where Jonathan Pryce withers into said creepy skeleton is very excellent, but it is a solid minute couched within about 7 minutes of whirling nonsense. It is just not, it is.
So the movie, I teased this before, but now's the time to talk about it, I think. The movie was written by Bradbury and directed by Jack Clayton. Great filmmaker. Directed The Innocents many years before this.
Oh, so this is our second Jack Clayton movie.
This is our second Jack Clayton movie. Probably a better cinematographer than necessarily a director. Because his directorial career, I mean, as one looks over it, there's not really a whole lot of classics other than The Innocents. But the... Not cinematographer, I'm sorry. He was a producer. Anyway, so he's very good at this kind of thick, gloomy, moody atmosphere. Now, when the film was in production, Clayton asked for a new draft of the screenplay, sort of without telling Bradbury, and this went very bad, and Bradbury got very pissed off. And he also commissioned a score that ended up not being used by Georges Delerue. And basically, the film was in the can with this new script, so Clayton was more or less happy with it. Bradbury was more or less not. Disney was not happy at all. Disney threw both Bradbury and Clayton off the project. Yikes. Did a bunch of reshoots, commissioned the new James Horner score, and what we have, therefore, is the sort of like Disney executive panicked and made a something. I actually don't know what's different between Clayton's rough cut and the movie we see. I assume some of those big, stupid effect sequences were primarily what Disney wanted to add, because those feel like Disney, and they do not feel like The Innocents. This is the studio that has recently, in 1983, has recently produced Tron and The Black Hole and The Watcher in the Woods. Yes, they are absolutely going to go into all that weird-ass animated lightning nonsense for the climax.
Mm-hmm. And for sure, like, the scenes where there's, like, that kind of Virgin Mary type statue that has the lightning shooting out of it, that is for sure a reshoot. Like, it is nothing to do with anything.
Oh, yeah. So I agree with you there. Like, when this movie becomes a special effects epic, it makes no sense, because why is it a special effects epic? It's a moody, atmospheric bedtime story for children who want to be spooked. Like,
yeah.
Why does it need to have Emperor Palpatine shooting Pam Grier with his lightning bolts? Pam Grier's in this movie.
She is, ever so briefly.
Briefly.
God, basically, so all the people I looked at the cast list and was excited about, pretty much, I was like, oh, you're barely in it. Diane Ladd, why is she in this movie?
Diane Ladd gotta eat, you know?
Yeah.
This is when Diane Ladd at this point was into the donut hole of her career where she was an old actress, but she wasn't yet like an elder stateswoman. She was certainly not the mother of an important actress at this point. So I think she's just like, get me a 60-year-old. Diane Ladd's free. I think it's sort of where her career's at this point.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yes, yeah. So, no, it's just very peculiar how everything's kind of doled out. I would say the one person, I mean, like I said, we don't get enough Jonathan Pryce, but I think we get much more of him than anyone else who matters, and I think that is a good thing. When he gets to I think he's the only one who can deliver that Ray Bradbury prose.
I agree.
Because he has these really plummy villain monologues in his big confrontation with Jason Robards as the dad. And that's some good shit. That is just...
the scene where those two confront each other. Actually, they have two scenes where they confront each other. Those are my two favorite scenes in this movie.
The other one being above the sewer grate when the kids are hiding.
Above the sewer grate and in the library.
Yeah, it's so good. That's the shit where it's like, okay, I get why kids at the time, maybe not kids, but just like people like this movie for any reason.
The sewer grate scene, I think, is a 5 out of 5 no notes masterpiece for me in terms of like children's horror. So the kids are hiding. Jason Robards is doing a very poor job of lying to Mr. Dark about where the kids are, and Mr. Dark sees through the lie and gets so furious at Jason Robards that he clenches his fists, and he clenches them so hard that blood starts gushing out of his palm. And the kids at this point are hiding below him in the sewer, looking up at this conversation through a sewer grate, and his blood, Mr. Dark's blood, starts dripping on one of their faces. And that is intense shit.
Yeah.
For a children's horror. Like, that is something that I know I did not see this movie until, like I said, sometime in the 2000s. I feel like I saw that scene. Because that scene strikes something very, like, primal in me, that I feel like it's not just like, ooh, this is creepy. It's like, I feel this fucked me up when I was 8 or something like that.
Huh. Yeah, maybe you walked in a room while someone was watching it.
That happened. Maybe that scene was like being excerpted in some sort of Disney Halloween clip show. I don't know. Because like, I'm confident I didn't see this film as a child, but that scene does feel like I encountered it at some point.
Yeah, no, and
I don't know.
I mean, and it's potent in a way that even if you don't have nostalgia for it, which I don't, you feel like, or nostalgia, or like that core memory of it. You feel like a cultural memory of it almost. Like you can feel it disturbing children across the globe, even if you aren't one of them.
Sure. No, that makes sense.
I don't know. I just want to compare it to like so the first Muppets thing I ever watched was the 2011 Muppet movie.
I find that unspeakably tragic, but okay.
I actually love that movie. But I since have seen kind of most of the other Muppet stuff, and I now love all of it. With certain exceptions. They had some rough times in the 90s.
They sure did.
But anyway, so in the 2011 Muppet movie, when they all get together and sing Rainbow Connection at the end, like, that made me tear up, and I'd never heard that song before. So I could tell the potency of the thing that was without ever having experienced it before. And I think that's kind of what this scene in Something Wicked is kind of like too.
I can see that. That's an interesting way into this. Thank you. I also just feel really sorry for the 8-year-old version of you who was not being fed a steady diet of Muppet properties, but that's a different story.
Well, that's okay. I had to come to them a little later, and that's fine. I mean, my parents gave me a very good cultural diet. Just Muppets weren't part of it. Okay. But without it, if I had grown up with the Muppets, I wouldn't have had the best double feature I've ever done, which is when I was recovering from surgery and a little bit high on painkillers and watched for the first time the 1979 The Muppet Movie and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Was that the first time you'd watched the Texas Chainsaw Massacre? That's an incredible double feature.
Oh, yeah. No, it was great. So I'm glad for that experience.
I hope that you managed to conflate the movie in your brain such that the scene of Kermit walking through the abandoned western town somehow like wedged itself into your mind as part of Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
You mean the camera doesn't like zoom in past his ass when he's walking into the town? Anyway, sorry. Yes, say what you were saying.
So that scene I think is terrific. There's this scene where in the library, Jason Robards' character is a librarian, and Jonathan Pryce is taunting him by offering him his youth, but there's like sort of a ticking clock, so he keeps ripping pages out of this book, and every time he rips a page out, he counts off, well, that's one more year you don't get. Like, now you'll be 35, now you'll be 36. It's sort of like reminding Robards of like, this is the year when you could no longer like walk upstairs without running out of breath and things like that. And it's just it's a goofy scene because, like, on top of everything else, when he rips out the pages are, like, animated with this golden glow. And it looks silly. But Pryce is so angry in this moment, and Robards just looks completely lost and scared and confused. And I do like Robards in the film. It sounds like you don't.
No,
at least love him.
I'm at least ambivalent towards him in this movie.
Okay, I am pro him in this movie. But that scene just has like this kind of ferocious, terrifying energy to it that sort of transcends what a objectively silly thing it is we're looking at. So short version, this movie is good when it's letting Jonathan Pryce off the leash.
Yes, and
it does not do that nearly as much as I would like it to.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I would say that book scene is probably my personal favorite in this movie. And I would say the only non-Jonathan Pryce scene that gets anywhere close to any kind of potency like that is probably the tarantula scene, but only one of the boys is acting in that scene, and the other one is just... I think he got bonked on the head with a frying pan or something. Because there's a part where he brushes a spider off his shoulder like he's sleepwalking, just staring off into the middle distance and like, oh, okay, but the imagery being presented there is really creepy and good.
Yeah, no, there's a shot specifically of one of the boys on top of a bed backing against the wall.
Yeah.
While the bed sheets are like pulsating with the army of tarantulas crawling underneath it. That is a fuck up your kid's image.
Oh, for sure. Oh, that's so good. Yeah. But no, the child actors, they're so rarely anything.
I'm not as hard on the child actors in this movie as I think you are. Although I will also say I like them better in these scenes that are, as you point out, that are not horror.
Yeah, like in that same actor, the scene where he sits with his dad and asks, "Am I a good person?" That's a great scene. I think that's well performed by both of them. But I wasn't as sold on the whole. I don't like kids. I don't want to see them.
That's fair. I mean, I saw in your Letterboxd review that just the mere fact of spending an hour and a half in the company of 12-year-olds was a turnoff for you. And it's like, oh, well, I was a 12-year-old once. I can vibe with that.
With 12-year-old boys specifically,
I was a 12-year-old boy once. I can vibe with that.
No, I was too. Didn't like myself back then, and I was only hanging out with 12-year-old girls. So, you know. That's just it's not a thing for me. Like, I recently rewatched The Goonies with Ben, my boyfriend, and I was just like, cannot do this. Just these boys tumbling over one another and shrieking for an hour and a half. It's just really wears my soul down.
Oh, But no, to sort of wrap up my thoughts, like I think this is a movie with three great scenes, and they're the three we've talked about: the tarantulas, the library, the sewer grate. I think in general, it's at least very fun to watch when Jonathan Pryce is on screen, even in moments that I think are maybe not quite clicking. Like the first revelation of, oh, he's got something creepy going on, as he holds his arm up to the camera, and like his tattoo is animated like a kaleidoscope, and it looks cool, but it's also like, what are you communicating to me? Like, is this bone-chilling terror? Is this super neat? Is he an alien? Like, what is meant to be my emotional takeaway here? Because I'm not having one. But in general, Jonathan Pryce being on screen means I'm having a good time. And I think it begins to pick up enough kind of momentum of this, like, horror-ish sort of thing. Like, there's the scene where the boys are, like, running through the town during, like, a parade, and the parade's this kind of creepy. I guess Jonathan Pryce is involved there, but it's a scene, really, for the boys. That feels good to me, and it's sort of like the inexplicable logic of a nightmare where all of a sudden you're running and you don't quite know why you're running, but you know you better not get caught. Like, it taps into that a little bit for me. So I would say in general, I'm like a fan of this movie's second half.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I don't disagree. I think that seems interesting too. There's the part where there's child-sized coffins in the parade. And there's a lot of eerie, kind of neat stuff going on in that second half. But I think, you know, the scores that we gave it, I think, are a fair enough range. Because you gave it 3 stars, I gave it 2. I think I knocked that star off just because the other things in it were working less for me than they were for
fair.
you.
And I will also say, to me, I waffled between 3 and 3.5 because it is like a spot on 3.25 movie for me. I ended up breaking in favor of always being harsher and more judgmental than kind.
Of course.
But to me, the strengths are quite strong. I think like that sewer grate scene is like a Hall of Fame scene to me. So like I don't want to diminish the strengths of the movie.
Yeah, no, nor do I. Like I said, I can see why people would love this movie. I just think most of the reasons that they do aren't for me. And I do think that some of the kookier 1980s effect sequences don't work, but specifically because of the kind of timeless setting of the movie. It's set in this kind of murky past many years before the 1980s. So the part that's like very much, we drew blue lightning on the screen. Or also the extremely 1980s hair of the sexy babe that the spinster teacher turns into. Like, those things just don't... Because I like silly 80s effects, but they don't work in this context.
No, this is a storybook. This isn't cheesy.
Yeah, exactly.
And the effects make it cheesy.
Yeah, it's just not right. Anyway.
You know, it's ultimately the same problem that I have with all of Disney's attempts at this point to try and make something that is like, Disney goes in hard for the teen boy audience in the early 80s after it becomes clear from Star Wars how much money is to be made there. And every one of their attempts, this, Black Hole, I mean, this and Watcher in the Woods are probably for a younger audience than that. But like they're doing this thing that they want to sort of be taken seriously. They want to make movies that are not just like fluffy kid shit. And they always sort of end up in the same place of like, ultimately you are going to have animated light show happen, and it's always going to feel a little goofy and insubstantial. And that's, I mean, maybe not literally every one of their films that's trying to do this in the early 80s, but it keeps happening.
Yeah, and it's just a little bit of a bummer.
Yeah, no, for sure.
But would I warn anyone against this movie? I don't think so. I just didn't love it.
Yep. No, I mean, like, I wouldn't warn anyone against it. At the same time, I don't know that I would, with any real enthusiasm, recommend it to anyone.
Yeah, I think if something Wicked This Way Comes is going to do something for you before you turn it on.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so I guess I apologize directly to Gavin, who was mad at my Letterboxd review. Just kidding. I'm not sorry at all. But... Or maybe he was just trying to scare me. His comment was just boo. So maybe it was just a Halloween thing.
That's a good point.
Anyway. I don't know. That's what I got about this movie. Are you...
I'm pretty much tapped out. We talked about Jonathan Pryce. We didn't entirely talk about how Jason Robards is my grandpa, and I want to give him a hug, but he is, and I do.
Okay, that's nice. Do you know him from other things?
Jason Robards? Yeah. Absolutely. He's a multiple Oscar-winning actor.
Anything I might have seen?
I feel like surely the answer to that question is yes. Let me quickly pull up his. So his Oscars were for All the President's Men and the film he made directly after Julia.
Got it. Okay, so I'm looking it up now. So I have on my IMDb account it because I rate everything. It pulls out the things that I have seen whenever I go on an actor's page, which is a feature I love. But no, I have only seen him in Something Wicked This Way Comes.
Well,
oops.
Sit your ass down in front of All the President's Men one of these days.
Yeah, no, I will. I'll get to it. Well, there you go. This is not my first Jonathan Pryce movie, but the first time that I recognized Jonathan Pryce as a name that is the first time I heard that name and it stuck in my brain was when he was nominated for an Oscar for The Two Popes, and I was like, what is that movie and who is this man?
Oh, Jonathan Pryce is an international treasure.
Yes. No, and I love him in this, and I've seen him in... Well, I've seen things with him that I didn't recognize before that, but now I recognize him because I'm like, oh, it's the Two Popes guy.
Oh.
I don't know.
Well, as long as you think of him as the Two Popes guy, he will never stop producing performances that you find wonderful because he's better in most things.
Yeah. Well, and again, I haven't seen the Two Popes. I've just
he's Keira Knightley's dad in the Pirates movies.
Yeah. No, like I said, I've seen him in things. But
okay.
That was the thing that crystallized like this name, this face to me. That was the moment where I recognized Jonathan Pryce.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm really showing my ass in the end of this episode. I guess 1970s icons are not my strongest suit, and I've never claimed that they were.
Well, Jonathan Pryce is this is actually very early in his career. This is not an icon yet.
Okay.
Yeah, this is he actually got hired because all of the first choices were outside of the film's budget, including Christopher Lee.
Christopher Lee would have been good, but I think Jonathan Pryce is where it's at for me.
I like him being a young guy.
Yeah.
I like Dark being sort of a young-ish looking man and not like a weathered elder statesman type, which Lee would have been by this point.
Yeah, and I think I need him to be younger than Jason Robards, or younger looking.
Well, I mean, most people are younger looking than Jason Robards.
Not Christopher Lee, though.
I was going to say, if you exhume Christopher Lee's corpse right now, he probably looks at least slightly younger than Jason Robards.
Okay. Anyway. That is that on Something Wicked This Way Comes. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you're not too mad. If you love this movie, that's wonderful. I'm very happy for you. But anyway, we'll come back next month with a whole new topic. If you remember the Patreon, keep an eye out. We will have a poll for you to vote for one of the titles that we discuss in August. Woof, it's going to be so hot. Anyway. Thank you so much. You can find more of my reviews, Tim's reviews, podcasts, and everything at alternateending.com. Bye-bye.